Welcome to GWO's Spring 2022 release webinar. If you joined us for one of these events before, you'll know this is where we share information about new and revised standards and updated requirements. The latest round of updates will be published tomorrow. This is a preview of what you can expect on the 1st of April. I'm Ralph Savage, Director for Global Development and Stakeholder Relations, and with me is Nina Kirk, Global Communication and Marketing Lead.
Thank you, Ralph. Well, we have a packed agenda today covering governance for training quality and workforce training standards. We will begin with the quality side of the house. A working group of stakeholders has updated our requirements, and we will take you through them one by one, with the help of Jose Mendes, who led this project. In the second half, we'll focus on the workforce training standards with our training project managers, Christian Bjørnsen and Thomas Grønlund. Christian will talk us through the new Control of Hazardous Energies standard, and then Thomas will explain about the two new lift training modules. We also have updates to the first aid and manual handling modules of BST, and we'll touch upon the new GWO Taxonomy, which is being rolled out across the whole portfolio. After we have gone through everything, we will take your questions. And if you want to learn more about this update in depth, the team will be hosting further webinars next week. So be sure to join if you have the time. You can find information and register at our website. As ever, today's webinar will be recorded, and you will receive copies shortly after, and we'll post them on our YouTube channel as well.
And now to welcome our panel. Jose Jimenez has worked in wind since 2003 in a variety of HSE leadership roles with GE Renewable Energy. He joined GWO in 2019 and is responsible for internal and external governance, operational risk and business continuity. Christian Bjørnsen is Training Project Manager, covering training standard reviews and development projects. Christian graduated from Aarhus University in 2019 and worked as training specialist for Siemens Gamesa Renewable Energy before joining GWO in 2020. Thomas Grønlund also manages GWO training standard reviews and development projects. Thomas had a long career in the Royal Danish Navy's Training and Education branch before joining GWO in August 2020. His key focus areas are pedagogical and didactic development.
So, let's begin with the governance for training quality. We published new versions of requirements for training providers and certification bodies as part of our ongoing work to deliver quality assurance across the GWO training network. The requirements are the responsibility of the GWO Audit and Compliance Committee, and the update process is done through consultation with a working group. In addition to our members, there were 11 training providers and 9 certification bodies involved. This ensured a solid representation of the users of these requirements.
Yes, first up is the requirements for certification bodies, and I'll ask you, Jose, to explain some of the bigger changes. So make sure your microphone is ready. The first update is a change in the wording for how many participants should be trained during a witness training. Jose, it's no longer a minimum of 4 participants. How should this be understood by auditors now?
At the moment, with the current version of the requirements, this minimum of 4, indicated some challenges when the audits, were to be planned, because these are normally planned within 3 months in advance, and of course, at that time, you don't know, how many course participants you're going to have in any witness training. So with this change, now, the certification bodies or the auditors and the training providers will be able to plan well in advance an audit, making sure that the audit can take place and the training can be witnessed with a lower number of participants. However, for certain standards or for certain elements in the standards, there may be a minimum number of participants that the standard requires, mostly for the practical exercises. And if that is the case, then this must be in place for during the audit.
Okay, thanks, Jose. The next 2 updates are connected. First is a 3-step process that's been introduced for first-time auditors. And then we have a new requirement for existing auditors to remain qualified. Can you give our guests a bit more detail on these 2 items, Jose?
Absolutely. these are, two critical changes in the requirements, and the ultimate goal is to try and get better audits, and this mainly through a better qualification of the auditors in two items which are critical for these. One is for the new auditors who are going to be auditing for the first time a training provider. The qualification now is going to require, in addition to the entry course, which is the auditor qualification training, additional experience before the auditor goes to audit on his own or her own. So there will need to be a 3 steps process to qualify the auditor, and this will be the auditor to participate as observer in an audit done by a qualified auditor, then the auditor to participate as team member in an audit, and then the auditor to audit under the supervision of a GWO qualified auditor. So as I said, when a new auditor now completes an audit, he or she will have participated at least in 3 audits, and this will increase, of course, the understanding of the GWO standard, is the requirements. And then for the existing auditors, it's important to look for an entry qualification, but it's similarly important to ensure continuous education of the auditors. And we are rolling a new course, which is the Auditors Development Training, that will need to be taken every year by every auditor to ensure that the auditor is updated in regards to new standards and the new trends and the new outcomes from investigations, and have a pool of auditors who are fully up to it in the latest changes.
All right, so lots of new improvements for quality assurance. The next one is designed to give training providers and auditors more flexibility in the type of training witnessed during a surveillance audit. How's this going to help, Jose?
This is something which has been highly demanded by our network of training providers, and agreed as well by the auditors. This is a simplification coming mainly from the understanding that there's a lot of synergies among the 3 settings, which are fixed, mobile, or on-site training. So once you certify initially a module to be delivered in these settings, which will need to be certified for each of the settings, then you will verify that the instructor has the required equipment to training or to provide training either in a fixed site or in a mobile site or in the field. But once you have certified this for the first time, then what you're checking, mainly is the ability of the instructor to provide the training in that module. And this is why we will allow that in the surveillance audits, you can choose which of these settings you are witnessing. So you will not need to witness the 3 settings moving forward, and you will just witness one of the 3, and that will be chosen by the auditor in coordination with the training provider.
Okay. And finally, we have a change in connection with training providers rejoining the network. What were the drivers behind this update?
In this one, first of all, there's very few occasions in which a training provider needs to go through initial certification again. This could be because surveillance audits are not conducted in time, or in a very, very minimum number of occasions because the approval is withdrawn following a decision by the Audit and Compliance Committee. In these cases, the training provider can proceed directly to stage 2 because stage 1 is in the end a preparation the training provider to ensure, there's an understanding of, what is required and the equipment is in place, which of course, must have been in place if the training provider has been operated, for certain time. So this will allow, the training provider just to select an auditor who can then go back to the training center and certify again the training provider.
So that wraps up this topic. But before we move on, there's another important change coming soon, which many stakeholders have inquired about. The requirements are going to be updated in the coming months to reflect a growing number of training providers who want to operate multi-site locations from a single certificate. This is quite a complex challenge from a quality assurance point of view, but it's been prioritised by the working group and will communicate their findings as soon as they're ready.
Yes, significant discussions have been ongoing in the work group on this matter, and there's a clear, consensus among the different stakeholders that there needs to be a simplification for the multi-sites. At the moment, in reality, the sites are being treated independently, and there's a lot of opportunities for simplification. There's significant work already been done, and this is being prioritized, and changes will be communicated soon. And the idea is that we allow sampling among the different sites when we are talking about the surveillance audits. So again, just stay tuned. This will not be, something immediate, but there's an active, smaller working group which is gonna make a formal proposal very soon.
Okay.
Thank you, Jose. So now we move on to the requirements for training providers. The first two items are about on-site training. Training on-site is happening more and more across the network, and the working group implemented these changes to accommodate this trend. Jose, could you briefly explain the detail behind these?
Absolutely. The first one is in regards the auditors and the training providers who are delivering training on site, which are mainly members. We were requiring the signature of a duty holder before the on-site training was being delivered, and sometimes this created a challenge. So now there'll be two signatures required. One is the one from the instructor, which of course is the ultimate responsible for safe training being delivered, and the other one can be either a duty holder or a representative of the duty holder, which can be a site manager or can be any other role the duty holder is comfortable with in regards deputizing for the training for the instructor, understanding the specific risks which that wind farm may have. So again, another simplification decision which will benefit the audits being planned with more efficiency.
Sure. And as always, we have updates designed to clarify and define an item for users. Firstly, it might seem simple to some, but the working group wanted to ensure we now have a clear definition of what is a non-conformity and what is a pilot training. So, Jose, could you tell us why is this important?
Well, even though many of our stakeholders understood what a non-conformity is, the reality is that for the smaller training providers, it was considered useful to add a non-conformity definition, so that when the audits and mainly the internal audits are conducted, this is well understood. And the same with pilot training. In the end, a pilot training is a training which is where a new standard before it's formally released is being piloted in a training center. So it's just making more explicit these two concepts, and just to make sure that there's also a good understanding of what we mean with the with the point before about the new definition for on-site training and the alignment. First of all, the on-site training appear to be confusing to a number of our stakeholders. Now, I mean, it's been further clarified so that the auditors fully understand that when you deliver training on site and you do part of this training, mainly the theory in a small service center, as an example, you can do this, I mean, for years, but you still don't need to certify as a fixed facility that a small office or that a small training center you're using. And so that was for clarification purposes. And then the other important change is that we are aligning the on-site training with the other settings. So requirements version 9 require, you know, that the on-site training had a 1-year cycle of certification, and the others had 2 years. Now the on-site training is being aligned with the other settings.
Thank you. And finally, one of the essential roles of the Audit and Compliance Committee is to make decisions following investigations. You may have read announcements recently about investigations that have been completed, in which a training provider certification has been suspended or withdrawn. Given these are the most serious actions we can take, the new requirements have been updated to make the process clear. So this is a big part of your own work. Can you explain further how we can deal with complaints and carry out investigations?
Yes, the vast majority of our training providers follow the rules and are fully on board with our requirements and compliance. And there's a very limited number of those, I mean, who sometimes, I mean, either, you know, have challenges or, you know, I mean, directly, I mean, go into non-compliance. For the cases when this non-compliance with the requirements are very serious, investigations are being conducted by the GWO Secretariat. And then we verify, I mean, how and when and why the requirements were not being followed. In some cases, this may trigger a proposal to withdraw the approval of a training provider or withdraw the approval for an auditor or a certification body. If the non-compliances, as I said, you know, are really significant, and there's a perception that there was an intention deliberately to bypass the rules. And so it's important to understand that the role of the GWO Secretariat, in this case, led by me for the investigations as the Risk and Governance Manager, is to propose a final action to the GWO Audit and Compliance Committee, who will in the end take the final decision. As you all may be aware of, the GWO Audit and Compliance Committee is formed by representatives of the GWO members. And these are the ones who ultimately take the decision on what is the action or the consequence for this, as I said, a very, very small number of stakeholders who were non-compliant with the rules.
Thanks, Jose. Thank you all for listening. And now we wanted to take a quick break, actually, by asking you a question about what you just heard. Could you please follow the instructions on?
So now we will move to the second part of our agenda, workforce training standards. There's a lot to get through, and we begin with the new Control of Hazardous Energies training standards.
As before, we'll provide a brief list of key facts and information about the standard. There's been a draft version of this standard on our website since October 21, but if you haven't seen it before, it consists of 3 modules: basic safety, CoHE, electrical safety, and pressure fluid safety. There are 24 individual lessons, and the full package of 3 modules takes just under 22 hours of contact time to complete. The standard's been rigorously pilot tested and is applicable across borders. Plus, it has a strong level of support from members who recognise this risk as a major cause of injuries in the workplace. Christian is working on this standard. He's been responsible for managing the working group. Hi, Christian. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, Rolf. Thank you.
The first question is a general one about the standard. What was the need members identified to you that led to its development?
Yeah, I think the need was established by the members through a thorough analysis done by the working group. Part of it is, of course, to see that hazardous energies, in particular electricity, pose a high risk for wind turbine technicians. Therefore, part of the aim is to release a training standard which complements, for instance, company-specific CoHE trainings by providing a common basis which is recommended by the GWO members. And this need was established through, as I mentioned, a thorough analysis, but also elaborate work by the working group looking at injury statistics, company-specific documentation, procedures, and doing analysis and seeing what is actually the need that we have for the industry, and therefore establishing the control of hazardous energy training standards, which we have now ended up with.
I think you touched on it a little bit in your answer there. In many ways, control of hazardous energies hasn't been designed to replace existing programs for employers, but to establish this common ground. Can you just elaborate a little bit more about what that signifies?
Yeah, definitely. I think, as again mentioned, it's a minimum standard that complements a company-specific, but it can also complement turbine-specific, regional, equipment-specific, both in terms of CoHE programs, but also trainings. And it's, for example, very clear in the training standards that completing the trainings will not automatically qualify a participant as a qualified person for some of the GWO members. Those nominations will always only be granted according to the specific company procedures, so the company trainings, competencies, rule procedures, along with national and regional legislation. So it's meant to provide a common basis and to complement company-specific CoHE programs.
Yeah. What about the contents of the training itself? What are some of the main skills, knowledge, abilities instructors are going to be teaching on CoHE courses?
Yeah, it of course varies depending on the target group that we have. So for instance, for basic safety CoHE, a part of the aim is to enable participants to act safely when they work in the vicinity of hazardous energies. So thereby, by being able to recognize and avoid hazardous energies, and for instance, part of the key objectives is simply knowing what to do in hazardous situations. So knowing when and who to ask for help, and being able to recognize hazardous energies in certain situations. For instance, electrical safety, where we have more of a target group who will lead and supervise work teams who, for instance, do tests of absence of voltage. Here there's more of a focus on, for instance, the use of safe electrical working procedures and safe working practices, but also something like establishing an electrical safe working condition. So it's depending on the target group, and all the aims and objectives are listed in the training standard.
Okay. Thank you, Christian. We're going to sort of limit the number of questions that Nina and I asked the guys, and encourage you guys also to remember that we'll do a Q&A session after we've gone through this main part. So please use the Q&A function in Zoom to type in your questions, and we'll go through those after we've gone through the remainder of the presentation.
So we'll have another opportunity to ask Christian about CoHE shortly. Meantime, we have prepared some handouts, including today's slide deck and some FAQs, which are being shared in the chat right now for you to download. The next item to discuss is the lift training, where we have 2 new modules. So lift user is already available. Lift commission and inspection is the second. Lift commission, inspection, installation, and maintenance is the third. Overall, the standard contained hundreds of learning objectives, and the total contact time for all 3 modules is 25 hours. Thomas Conlon, you have project managed the development of the training, and we can see that supporting standardization is a key driver. Can you tell us about why there is a need to develop a more aligned training in this area?
Yes, I can try. Thank you, Nina. I suppose that there are at least 200 different lift models around the world from different manufacturers and different configurations. And in principle, every wind technician should be trained in every lift he or she is expected to operate or work on, as it is today. And this multiple training regime is no longer relevant with the new generic GWO trainings, because these trainings, they cover in principle any wind turbine lift in the wind industry. So you could say one training to rule them all.
Sure. So how about the context of the training? What are some of the main skills, knowledge, and abilities participants will learn on the 3 lift courses?
I think that well, as the GWO generic lift trainings, they are a guarantee for the wind turbine owners and the operators that the wind technicians, they hold the necessary knowledge and abilities to, in principle, operate and work on any lift in the industry. So a precondition for this is that the wind technician, he will always use the manuals and guides that are relevant for the lift and the task at hand. So yes, it's a generic training. You learn all the general principles of a lift, but when you're out there working, you should have the manual, look into it, see on this lift, I can do this, I cannot do this. So this is the sort of the insurance for the lift owners that they will do the right thing.
Sure, thank you for that. I know, Thomas, you have participated in pilots at several training centers. What advice could you give to a training center considering making an investment in developing this course?
It's a good question, but to the training providers, you'll need a functional lift setup, at least with one functional lift, where the participant can practice the principles for operating and for inspecting and for maintaining the lifts and the different parts on the lifts. And well, we talk about 3 different systems, lift systems. We talk about ladder guided lifts, wire guided lifts, and the rack and pinion driven lifts. So in the ideal training setup, you would have one of each system, but this is quite an investment. We recognize that. So what we suggest is that if you can have 1 or 2 different lift systems, and then be sure to have show and tell parts and manuals and visuals and guides from other systems, so you can say on this lift system we practice something, and then on another lift system it would look like this, and then we can show pictures or manuals from the internet or however we get the information. So yeah.
Thank you, Thomas.
Okay, so thanks to both of you. We'll have, again, plenty of time for questions, and you're most welcome to begin typing questions into the Q&A box in Zoom so that we'll have them ready. We're coming up to the last parts of the presentation now. And please remember, if you're interested in either control of hazardous energy or lift training, the guys are going to be hosting in-depth meetings on them next week. You can find details of how to register on our website in the events section. Our final topic today is training standards that have been reviewed or updated. The first one is first aid, the first aid module of BST. As you can see, all learning objectives have been updated, and the main module has been reduced to 7 hours, with the refresher changed to 4 hours. What's informed the changes? Well, as ever, it's the product of input from GWO members who monitor risk assessments and injury statistics. Christian, you managed this update, so I thought I'd put it over to you to explain a little bit further the detail behind it.
Thank you, Ralph. As it's listed here on the screen, you can see in terms of what informed, and there's listed, for instance, the injury statistic, and given the project scope that the working group was given, they have worked excellently together by, for instance, gathering and analyzing these all in to inform what is on a basic level, as a basic first aider, a wind turbine technician need to be able to do in what situation, to what level, and using that analysis of the job context to inform the training standards and the learning objectives, which has been focused on in the training standard. And all of this has been collaborated extremely well by the working group, who has done this in a very short time frame and with a really thorough analysis. So it's been great work by the working group.
Thanks, Christian. So the next update is to manual handling. There's no impact on the duration from this update, but some refinements have been made to the content in terms of new lessons and the applications of tile principles being the practical elements. Thomas, this project was in your area. We can see there's more focus on preventing specific injuries. Can you explain a little bit more about this update for us?
Yes, I'd be happy to. It's still a small 3 hours training, but I think we have a sound issue. Is that me? No. Okay, so we have enhanced the focus on warming up because we would like warm up to be a culture thing, something that we all do as a part of our DNA as wind turbine technicians before we do any manual handling at all. And this is both during training, but also out there in the real world. For example, warming up before entering up a wind turbine tower. So if this could be a culture, warm up before you do something with your body, that would prevent a lot of injuries. So we have put a focus on that in the training standard. And secondly, we have designed the practical training to focus now on 7 work-related physical postures. For example, work by kneeling, bend, carrying, lifting, pushing and pulling. And then by cutting down on the theoretical content and by applying the necessary theory during the practical exercises where it's relevant, we aim at a 70% practical training now. And by focusing the exercises on different physical postures, where it's possible to combine these, the training providers, you can actually design exercises with a very energy-filled flow, and the participants will work, and everybody will be working and learning and trying out. And we think it's been a much more instructor-friendly training standard now.
Yeah. Okay, and the last, but certainly not the least, update, it probably warrants a slide all on its own, but it's regarding the GWO Taxonomy. Thomas, this has been a big part of your work since you joined GWO, and for training providers, they're going to see the standards look a little different from tomorrow in terms of the language. Can you tell us about this?
Yes, I'd love to. Well, first of all, I'd say it's a team effort. The whole training team, we've been working a year on this project, and we have really tasted every word and discussed and done our very best to get the best product and the best formulations. And I think we have actually created a taxonomy framework that is one of the best in the world. I haven't seen anything better, actually. But it can always be discussed. So, but in this new taxonomy framework, we have wanted to set a focus on the individual, how the individual learn, and that they learn when they do something. When they actually do something, individuals, they have to do something to learn, and they have to reflect on what they did, and did it work, did it not work, and what should I be doing better next time. So this very focus on the participants doing in order to learn is the main driver for the taxonomy framework. And so this focus for involving learning activities has led us to do some adjustments in learning activities. Some of you guys out there, you may remember in some of the training standards, we have a lot of learning activities written as the instructor or the training staff should do this and present this and do this and present this, but nothing about the participant. We have changed this. We have this principle in the new taxonomy and in the standards that the instructor will never do anything without having the participants do something with what the instructor did. So the instructor shouldn't say anything if he doesn't want to see an effect in the participants. So this we have really underlined in all learning objectives, in all elements. We have always put the learners activities, participants activities, and instructors activities. So this is a major change. It is not maybe a major change, but in the document, it's a major change. I could talk a lot about this for hours, but I'll try to make it as short as possible, just to say.
That's great, Thomas. And you made a point, and I'm just going to label this for 1 moment. The documents themselves, so new versions of all of the training standards are being published tomorrow. The only ones that have been updated, as we've explained previously, is the first aid and the manual handling module. The remainder of the training standards, the content is still the same. What's been updated, as Thomas was explaining, is the taxonomy and the words that are used to describe the learning objectives. That's correct, right?
Exactly. We haven't changed. Sorry, we haven't changed any content in all the other standards. We have just changed the wordings, and we have put some learning activities on all elements.